Is going to talk about some of the events or one of the issues that we deal with at Firmsconsulting. And to explain this issue, I'm going to point out something that you may or may not be aware of. When Bill Bain and his team broke away from BCG to start Bain and Company, at no point did they advertise themselves as Bill Bain, ex-BCG senior partner, or Bain and Company is an leading strategy firm led by ex-BCG partners, right? They didn't do that. Why didn't they do that? They didn't do it for a very simple reason. If Bain and Company entire value add is the fact that it's ex-BCG people, by default, why would you hire Bain when you could just hire the firm that they think so highly of? Think about that for a second, because it's a very, very important point that you need to understand that most people don't understand. When most consultants break away from McKinsey and BCG and Bain, they absolutely love telling you how they're ex-McKinsey, ex-BCG. And why do they do that? If you are competing with McKinsey people for consulting work, it actually hurts you to say you are ex-McKinsey, because a potential client looking to hire the firm would say, why would we hire you who are ex-McKinsey and obviously very proud of it, when we can just hire the McKinsey firm itself? Of course, there are situations where clients hire ex-McKinsey people for maybe short-term work and so on, but it's not sustainable. That's the key thing. So the only time to really play up your ex-consulting background is A, when you're not willing or want to compete against the firm you left, which brings us to B, you are using the name of the firm because you are targeting clients who cannot hire the firm itself, so you're not competing with them. And 3, when you're not in the consulting space, and therefore it actually adds value to say I'm ex-BCG and ex-McKinsey. Right? But as soon as you go out there and start saying, oh, we're all Bain partners, and the reason you got to hire us is because we're ex-BCG partners, how are you going to compete against BCG? Now, one of the things you notice I do at Firmsconsulting is I'm deliberately underplaying the backgrounds of the people at Firmsconsulting when it comes to the executive program work. Because if we play up our backgrounds and say, oh, this partner went to BCG, this one went to McKinsey, this one was at Deloitte, why in the hell is a client going to hire us when they can hire the real deal like McKinsey, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And that's why we underplayed so aggressively. Because I don't want the only reason to hire us is because we were X, whatever. We don't want to be the X-Men, right? We want to be the now men. So when you are building any practice, and especially if you work at one of these consulting firms, initially it's going to be enormously tempting to say, well, I'm ex-McKinsey, that's why you need to hire me. But remember this, when you play that card, you are explicitly signaling to the client that, okay, so that means that you are not competing with McKinsey, and therefore the work you are doing is at a level below McKinsey. Because if you were competing with McKinsey, why in the hell would you be advertising for them by using their name, right? And why in the hell would a client possibly hire you when they could hire the real deal? So, to answer the question, why didn't Bain advertise themselves as ex-BCG people? Because they wanted to play at a level at least equal to, but probably higher than BCG when they started off. And the only way to do that was to shift the conversation away from BCG and onto them. Now, when you are starting off a boutique firm, when you run a boutique firm, I know how tempting it is because, when Firmsconsulting, the executive program is basically a boutique firm doing studies for clients. When we had to market ourselves, it was incredibly difficult initially. Everyone said, oh, play up your background. I said, no. We don't talk about the other firms, period. They don't exist. They should not exist in your bios. You remove them completely. And you tell the client, look, this is what we can do. These are our skills. This is what we've done. This is how we'll think through the problem for you. But at no point do you default onto the easy option of saying, hire me, please hire me. I'm ex-McKinsey. Because if you do that, you're never going to compete with McKinsey. And if you are constantly building your assets and your marketing material and everything about you, that the fact that you're ex-McKinsey and ex-BCG, you are never going to break out of that orbit. You're going to be a little satellite orbiting BCG and McKinsey, and you don't want to be a little satellite. No one wants to be a satellite, right? You want to build a firm that can stand on its own 2 feet. In the beginning, it's going to be incredibly difficult to do that. But I'm going to make the choice very simple for you. If you go around and you run a boutique and you tell everyone I'm ex-Deloitte, ex-Rollenberger, ex-McKinsey, whatever it is, you may convince yourself that you're competing against them. You may convince a lot of other people that you're competing against them. You may convince your wife that you are better than them. You may convince your mother-in-law that you're doing something important. But the reality is, the fact that your value is linked to another firm means you have no value. And in the short term, you'll make money. But you'll make money from clients that cannot afford McKinsey and BCG. That's why they're hiring you. And you've got to decide, do I want to run a business that only exists to pick up people, and I'm using the choice of words deliberately, it's going to pick up people that McKinsey doesn't want to serve or McKinsey doesn't think about? And if that's your strategy, then that is fine. But if you actually want to build a firm for the long term, I can assure you, you want to take the pain now and not leverage your past experience to build your firm, because it is not sustainable. You will never compete against the major firms if your value is the fact that you're an alumni of that firm. It can't happen. And if you think it can happen, I would really like you to explain that logic to me, because it is illogical, right? It cannot work that way. Because if your value is X, why would someone hire you? Why, when they could get X directly? Well, the only reason they would do it is if they cannot get X, which means that you are not competing in the space you are saying you are competing. And this is something I drive Firmsconsulting people to be very careful about. I talk about demonstrated competency. Don't fall for this trap of just talking about your past. Don't be the guy who only talks about the fact you worked at BCG or whichever firm 15, 20 years ago. It's horrible. It's like a 60-year-old guy going to a nightclub to pick up 18-year-old girls, right? I mean, it's really horrible. Don't do it. Every day you meet a client, you demonstrate your competence. You don't tell them you are clever by telling them you work somewhere. You demonstrate your competence. You show you are intelligent to the way you analyze problems. You show you are intelligent and worthy to hire because of the way you think things through, but not because of where you work. Don't live in the past. Don't be the old guy in the nightclub living in the past. Embrace the assets you have. Embrace the value that you now have and turn that into a competitive advantage. Being the offspring of another organization is not a competitive advantage. As always, I look forward to your thoughts, comments, questions, queries. This is maybe a provocative podcast, but it's the truth, right? And I know how many people are trying to set up their own firms, but also people who work at some very large firms try to position themselves against other organizations. And I always tell people, never ever go into a discussion raising the name of your competitor. Just don't do it, because you're advertising for them. If you're running a boutique, never go in raising the name of your previous employee, because you're just advertising for them. And the only time this is going to work for you if you're targeting a different clientele, which now you have to decide. Do you want to be targeting subpar clientele, the subprime clients of management consulting, or do you want to target the best and go head-to-head against your previous employer? It's your choice. But whenever I meet a boutique firm, anyone, and we get a lot of people writing to us, they're so proud to tell us they're ex-McKinsey and ex-BCG, I will not hire them because the culture is wrong. They're not demonstrating their value to me. They're kind of saying, oh, I worked at McKinsey, hire me. Firmsconsulting says they only hire ex-partners and ex-directors, so hire me. But I haven't seen the value. Where is the value that you have independent of where you worked before?